I'm Sarah Coates and you're watching I24 News. We begin here in Israel with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sending a strong warning to Hamas following a number of rocket launches and a continued escalation in violence from Gaza directed at Israel over the past couple of days. The Prime Minister warning Hamas that Israel will not hesitate to launch a large-scale operation in Gaza despite Israeli elections looming.
In recent days, we have been seeing provocations and lifting of the head from the direction of the Gaza Strip. This is done by rogue militants, but it does not absolve Hamas. Hamas is responsible for everything that comes out of the Gaza Strip, and we respond accordingly, with the Israeli Air Force strikes against Hamas targets. I have heard people from Gaza saying that since we are in an election campaign, a large-scale operation is out of the question. I suggest to Hamas, do not count on it. We will do whatever it takes to restore security and quiet to the Gaza perimeter in Israel and to the Israeli South in general.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has announced the new Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority. I24 News can confirm that longtime ally Dr. Mohammed Ishtaya is replacing Rami Hamdallah following weeks of speculation. The 61-year-old has been part of a number of Palestinian negotiating teams in US broker talks with Israel and is a former government minister. Analysts view the move as part of Abbas's efforts to further isolate his political rivals Hamas, which runs a rival administration in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has announced that it will not recognise the new government and that Fatah is not acting in goodwill. And for more on this story, let's bring in our senior Middle East correspondent, Mohammed Al-Qasem. Mohammed, thank you. Firstly, tell us a little bit more about Dr. Mohammed Ishtaya. What is his background and what does he stand for?
Well, he's mainly an economist. He's a British educated economist who held many positions and still do. One of them is an advisor to President Abbas regarding the economy and financial advisor. But he has been a harsh critic of the Hamas movement in the Gaza Strip. And his appointment comes with the backing of many of the members of the Fatah Executive Committee or Central Committee. That's the movement that President Mahmoud Abbas himself heads. But Fatah movement wants him and wants one of its members to become the next prime minister. And because of that, that will have major ramification on the domestic political affairs between the Palestinian factions. But he is someone who's going to have to deal with the cash-strapped Palestinian Authority. And because of his, being an economist and someone who understands the business arena, that's one of the major things that he's going to be challenged with right away.
So how do you believe, Mohammed, that his appointment will, let's say, isolate Hamas?
A couple of reasons here. One of them, he's a Fatah member, which means that he will not, on the orders of President Abbas, form a government that includes also members of other Palestinian factions, whether those who are close to Hamas or other Palestinian factions. He's a technocrat. He's going to focus on factions that belong to the Palestine Liberation Organization, which means that Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, two major Palestinian factions, will not take part of it. So this signals that the reconciliation talks at this time are almost dead, and they're not going any further. But also this also signals that maybe more sanctions, less money will be going from the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah and the West Bank to the Gaza-ruled Hamas movement in Gaza.
Okay, Mohammed, stay with me and let's move on now. And the leader of Israel's left-wing Meretz party has met with Palestinian Authority President Abbas in Ramallah. Tamar Zandberg is a strong advocate for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, she was joined on Sunday by Arab-Israeli Meretz lawmaker Isawi Frej. The Meretz party is Israel's most firmly left-wing outfit, which hasn't served in a government in 17 years since it was part of a coalition under former Labour Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Now, most public opinion surveys project Meretz earning between 6 to 8 seats in the upcoming elections in April. So, Mohammed, let's go back to you now. What are your main takes from this meeting?
I think President Mahmoud Abbas, even though he's not saying it publicly, but wants to, one way or another, influence the upcoming Israeli elections on April 9th. And by him appealing to the Israeli left, he wants to, to try to push forward the two-state solution and send a message to the Israeli voters that merits and those who support the two-state solution is the ones that Israeli voters should go out and vote for. He's pushing for, and this is, by the way, this isn't really the first time that President Abbas has met with Israeli politicians. He's done that in the past with academics and even activists. And he, it's been one of his major, thinking is that to talk directly to the Israeli voters and Israeli people in an attempt to sway their votes and also maybe convince them to apply pressure on their government to change how they approach the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Okay, senior Middle East correspondent Mohammed Al-Qasem, as always, thank you. Africans are in mourning after a passenger plane crashed earlier today on its way from Ethiopia to Kenya, killing all 157 passengers and crew on board, including 2 Israelis. The Air Ethiopia 737 went down 6 minutes after taking off from Addis Ababa on Sunday morning. Officials say there are no survivors. Now, the victims are from a number of countries, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Britain, France, America and Canada. The Office of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has offered its condolences, taking to Twitter to express sympathy to those who've lost loved ones on the flight. Here's the Kenyan Transport Minister.
You may be aware that the incident took place at 8:38 when the flight took off from Bole International Airport, and 6 minutes later, it got lost in terms of radar surveillance. It had 149 passengers on board with 8 crew.
3 Israeli soldiers who've been convicted of bashing Palestinians who were being held in custody have been sentenced to 190 days in prison, a demotion in their ranking and a suspended sentence. Now, that sentence was handed down today after a plea agreement was reached. The trio were part of an ultra-Orthodox battalion and were arrested in January, charged with severely assaulting the prisoners who were blindfolded and handcuffed. 2 other soldiers who were indicted in January are yet to reach a similar plea agreement with military prosecutors. Their commanding officer has also been charged with failing to prevent the assaults. Moving now to Israeli elections, and the latest polls show the right is strengthening and Benjamin Netanyahu's chances of forming a government are looking stronger, despite the fact that the ruling Likud is not the largest party. The survey by Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot shows if elections were held today, Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid's opposition blue and white list would have 33 seats, while the Likud wins only 29. The Labour Party, headed by Avi Gabai, is gaining strength with 10 seats. And when asked who would be the Prime Minister, 53% of respondents say they believe Netanyahu will stay in power, while 27% supported the Gantz-Lapid rotation. The fate of 2 so-called ISIS brides is still in the balance, but it's clear they won't be going back to Britain. A report out of the UK this morning says sisters Rima and Zara Iqbal from East London, who are being held in Syrian camps with their young children, have been stripped of their citizenship. The Sunday Times says the sisters, aged 30 and 28, are living in separate refugee camps with thousands of other families. The Home Office says it does not comment on individual cases, adding decisions to withdraw citizenship are not taken lightly. And we're going out for a short break, but when we come back, we'll take you live to our correspondent on the Israel-Gaza border for the latest on the growing tensions there as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu sends a stern warning to Hamas. Stay with us.
There's one thing the left and right can agree on. Spin is everywhere. From the halls of the Israeli parliament to the floor of Congress, with roundtables featuring politicians and movers and shakers debating the hot-button issues and tackling it head-on, we'll get beyond the headlines and expose the spin. Join me, Ami Kaufman, every Monday and Thursday on The Spin Room.
Watch The Spin Room, Mondays and Thursdays, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
I'm Lauren Izzo on I-24 News. Join me on High Definition right here for an in-depth understanding of Israel's diverse society in groundbreaking documentaries.
It's election season in Israel. New names are joining the race, new partnerships coming together, and old ones falling apart. The prime minister a frontrunner and facing major legal trouble. With newsmakers, exclusive polls, analysts, and correspondents will make sense of it all and why it matters.
Today, in partnership with Israel Hayom, only on I-24 News.
There's more to the news than meets the eye. Many voices, many faces, with interests often at odds. We take you deeper beyond the headlines, inside the drama, the controversy, perspectives. There's more than just one view.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's now go back to Gaza, where Israeli planes have struck targets there in the latest tit-for-tat cross-border escalation. The Israeli Defence Forces says fighter jets hit several targets early Sunday morning, including a military compound and two naval vessels belonging to Hamas. It says the strikes were in response to a Palestinian rocket attack on Saturday night, in which militants fired a mortar shell at the Eshkol region in southern Israel. Palestinian media is reporting that several Israeli strikes around 1:30 this morning near Beit Lahia, with no reports of casualties. And for more on this developing situation, let's now go to our correspondent Pierre Clochandler, who's standing by on the Israel-Gaza border. Pierre, thank you for being with us. Firstly, what can you tell us about today's developments on the Israel-Gaza border?
Well, there's not so much of any important security development, I would say, but there's been, the Qatari envoy was supposed to come to the Gaza Strip in order to give Hamas its $20 million stipends, which it receives every beginning of each month for the past 4 months. And he was prevented to cross from Israel into the Gaza territory simply because Israel does not want to allow the transfer of money to Hamas while the situation is continuing escalating. So there is some sort of punitive action by the Israeli government, some pressure applied on Hamas. But you have to understand, every beginning of each month since last November, the Qatari envoy has been giving money, and that has become very unpopular in Israel because Israel is saying that the Israeli government is allowing Hamas to extort money through violence. And being in the midst of an election campaign, Benjamin Netanyahu is, of course, very reluctant to allow transfer of money if this is not accompanied with quiet.
OK, Pierre Clochandler on the Israel-Gaza border, thank you very much for that update. Let's go back now to Israeli election news, and the latest polls show the right is strengthening and Benjamin Netanyahu's chances of forming a government are looking stronger, despite the fact that the ruling Likud is not the largest party. The survey by Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot shows if elections were held today, Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid's opposition blue and white list would have 33 seats, while the Likud would win only 29. And for more on this story, let's now bring in our diplomatic correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Mike, thank you. So it shows that the polls with the right is getting stronger. What can we attribute this to, Mike?
Well, you know, we got to look at the polls in the long run, and this is only one poll. But in the end, we've only really seen a shift of a few seats here and there, from the right to the left and back and forth. We've gone over the last few weeks. There haven't really been these wild swings, and everything has been within the margin of error. So I don't think really we've seen this titanic shift back and forth. I don't think even with the announcement of the pending indictments against the prime minister, pending a hearing, that there was really this dramatic shift. It's just been a few seats here and there. The center-left bloc, along with the Arab parties, had a 61-59 advantage in some of the polls last week. Now we're seeing a 61-59 or 62-58 advantage for the right. It's just a few seats, all within the margin of error, and very much contingent on some of the smaller parties that are just barely getting over the threshold to make the next parliament. In some polls, they're not getting over that threshold, and that adjustment of just a couple of seats is where we're seeing things. It's not really in the middle with Likud and blue and white. It's really on the outskirts of that political spectrum.
Okay, and Mike, a few days ago you had an interview with Naftali Bennett, who is the leader of the New Right Party and also the Education Minister. So tell us, what is he hoping for out of this election?
You know, I think Bennett at this point assumes, rightly or wrongly, that the Prime Minister will remain the Prime Minister. You know, he branched out on his own. He was a leader of the Jewish Home Party, a religious national party, wanted to branch out along with his co-founder, Ayelet Shaked, to form this New Right Party to try to expand their base a little bit. We talked to him about politics, about the upcoming election, and what his thoughts are. Let's give it a listen, what Naftali Bennett had to say.
They believe me. They know that what I promise is what I do. And here I'll make them a promise to the PLO leadership. As long as I'm part of government, I will not hand over 1 centimeter of land to the Arabs, and I will not let another Arab state be established west of the Jordan River. But I also promise that if they want to talk about peaceful coexistence and about economic thriving, I'll be a partner.
That was Naftali Bennett talking about the day after the elections, in which he expects the Prime Minister to remain the Prime Minister, but having to deal with the American peace plan being laid on the table. Bennett saying he and his New Right Party will be the only obstacles preventing a divided Jerusalem, preventing the formation of a Palestinian state. He says if it'll be up to Netanyahu in an attempt to please and appease Donald Trump, instead of forming an alliance with parties like the New Right, he'll form an alliance instead with Benny Gantz and parties in the center, because he knows Bennett and people to his right will prevent the formation of a Palestinian state. Bennett says this election is not about left versus right. It's about having a Palestinian state versus not having a Palestinian state.
All right, Mike Wagenheim, thank you for your time. Kibbutz Buchenwald is the name of a new controversial exhibition at Tel Aviv Museum of Art by artist Gil Yefman. The exhibition deals with the fracture between Holocaust and revival. More in the next report by Daniel Campos and Valerie Alcasis.
An LGBTQ artist, a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor that dresses up as Hitler, and a group of African asylum seekers who knit for a living got together at Tel Aviv Museum of Art to create one of the most bizarre, original, and taboo exhibitions in Israel. Welcome to Kibbutz Buchenwald.
The title has to do with an esoteric event, historical event, which took place already in Buchenwald, in liberation of Buchenwald. 15 Jewish prisoners established a kibbutz as a means to escape from the reality of post-World War II. They felt very lost, and that was their way to revive themselves.
Kibbutz Buchenwald settled in Israel in 1948, yet they had to change the name to Kibbutz Netzer Sereni.
Ben-Gurion and the kibbutz movement, they wanted them to change their name, although they were the one choosing their own name to remember and to commemorate their heritage.
For the exhibition, Holocaust survivor Dov Ordner dresses up as Bad Renro, a combination of his father and the Führer, responsible for the murder of his parents. For the video art installation, he performs at the Buchenwald Nazi concentration camp memorial. Kibbutz Buchenwald also tells the story of forced prostitution in German camp brothels in World War II.
We have created an installation which takes its inspiration from the brothels that were used as incentive structures for guards and best employees, which Himmler established.
The exhibition deals with the fracture between Holocaust and revival, but also touches on events that predated the Holocaust, such as the Herero and Nama genocide, a campaign of racial extermination carried out by Germans in what is today Namibia, estimated to have killed at least 100,000 people. The African asylum seekers members of the Kuchinate Collective also add a special meaning with their participation.
To expand and deepen the term of what means to be a refugee nowadays. So the exhibition takes the gap between history and memory, and with the power of imaginative recreation, creates new value out of it.
While there is no doubt that Gil Yefman's Kibbutz Buchenwald is a fantastic queer and mystic site, some viewers find it creepy and disrespectful to the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust. Tel Aviv Museum of Art is proud in their decision to host the original exhibition. Daniel Campos, I-24 News.
And Israeli fashion icon Gideon Oberson has been dressing women for over 50 years. Now, this year, Tel Aviv Fashion Week is opening with the House of Oberson's final collection. Gideon and his daughter Karen gave I-24's Jesse Satin a sneak peek before it hits the runway.
Swimwear, it's a very important line. It's not the design also. It's the mentality. The woman is undressed. She should feel very comfortable.
Israel's king of luxury swimwear, Gideon Oberson, has been dressing women from Tel Aviv to Los Angeles for over 5 decades. After studying in Paris, Oberson launched his eponymous line in 1962, bringing big ideas to his small home country.
We have no textile in Israel. So in this case, I was looking also for an article, an item that doesn't need a lot of fabric, because we didn't have any textile, that can use my brain, my idea, and less fabric. And what is better than a bikini? Just 3 triangles. And believe me, when I started, I made them so small, and this was really the beginning of the swimwear line.
Oberson's designs, not only his swimwear, but also in ready-to-wear, couture, and bridal, have made him a favorite in international markets. Yet, he notes the global fashion market can be a tough place for Israeli designers.
I remember 20, 30 years ago when we went out with the Israeli garments and we made some fashion weeks in the States, in Australia, in Europe. You know, the whole department stores with Israeli flags. Now, when we go to fairs, international fairs, we don't use Israeli flag. It's made in Asia or made in, but Israel as a name, we cannot go because we have many countries where we are buying the product, but they are not, we cannot really speak out loud our name.
But this was not enough to stop Oberson's daughter, Karen, from following in her father's footsteps.
Actually, I just born into it. My parents, they were 20 years old when I was born, and actually, I was crawling on pins.
In 1985, Karen launched her brand KO and joined forces with her father at the Oberson House of Design. Now, after 34 years of working together, the Oberson House of Design will show its final collection Sunday evening at the 2019 Tel Aviv Fashion Week.
I'm really using even old dresses. I got from one of my customers, 69. She said, I have still a dress. If you are doing a show, I think this should go on the runway. And I took it and it's going on the runway. It's really a mix of old and new. And I think this is the life today.
Ahead of Fashion Week, Oberson was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Israel's Ministry of Culture and Sport. While they may be moving off the catwalk, Gideon and Karen plan to remain fixtures in the Israeli fashion industry, teaching and mentoring the next generation of designers.
They're working alone, and to work alone and to do everything, it's impossible. So they need the support. They need somebody, even just an eye to see what they're doing to support them in everything.
There are a lot of talent from Israel going abroad and working, but this is not the idea. We want them back. We want them really to create Israeli fashion and to see that it's something here.
And that is all we have time for this edition of I24 News. But of course, we are continuing to bring you all of the breaking stories. So do go ahead and visit us online. That's i24news.tv. And we have all of those breaking stories on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.